So here's something that's gonna sound crazy at first, but stick with me. For most of human history, the most valuable thing on Earth wasn't gold. It wasn't silver. It wasn't land. It was flavor. Like actual spices. A handful of dried seeds or a pinch of tree bark could literally make or break entire empires. I know. Today you walk into any grocery store and there's a whole aisle of spices for like $3 each. But go back a few hundred years, peppercorns were worth more than gold. Nutmeg could literally buy you a house. Cinnamon could pay off a lifetime of debt. And nations were willing to kill, conquer, and risk absolutely everything just to control where these flavors came from. And honestly, when you dig into this story, it completely changes how you see the modern economy. Because so much of what we deal with today, the supply chains, the corporations, the financial systems, it all started with people trying to get their hands on better food seasoning. Wild, right? So let me take you back. Before any of the stuff we know today existed, before America, before stock exchanges, before oil was even a thing, the global economy basically ran on spices. And not just because they made food taste better, they actually solved real problems that people couldn't solve any other way. Think about it. No refrigeration, no antibiotics, no way to preserve meat for more than a few days. Spices could preserve food, disinfect wounds, treat illnesses, and cover up the taste of stuff that was, let's be honest, probably going bad. And on top of all that practical stuff, they were a massive status symbol. If you could afford to put cinnamon in your food in medieval Europe, you were basically announcing to everyone that you'd made it. So picture Europe in the 1100s, 1200s, cold, gray, pretty isolated. Most people never went more than a few miles from where they were born. Diets were boring. Winters were brutal. And yet, somehow, nobles are throwing these feasts with exotic spices from places they couldn't even point to on a map. A single pound of pepper could buy you livestock. A small bag of saffron could get you weapons. These weren't treats. These were legitimate financial assets. But here's the thing. Getting those spices to Europe was insanely complicated. None of this stuff grew anywhere near Europe. Pepper came from the Malabar coast in India. Nutmeg came from a tiny group of islands in Indonesia called the Banda Islands. The cinnamon came from Sri Lanka. To get any of this to a dinner table in Paris or London, it had to pass through like a dozen different middlemen. Indian traders sold to Arab merchants. Arab merchants shipped through Egyptian ports. Egyptian ports sold to Venetian ships. And every single person along the way took their cut and added their markup. And get this, to protect their trade routes, merchants would just make stuff up. They told Europeans that cinnamon grew in giant bird nests guarded by monsters. That nutmeg came from islands surrounded by dragons. That pepper grew in forests so dangerous they had to burn them down to harvest it. These weren't just fun stories. This was strategic misinformation. Early corporate trade secrets designed to keep outsiders from figuring out where the goods actually came from. And at the end of this whole chain was Venice. Venice didn't grow any spices, didn't control any of the source regions. But what it controlled was the bottleneck, the entry point into Europe. By the 1200s, Venice had basically locked down a monopoly on importing pepper and other high-value spices. They'd stockpile stuff in warehouses and only release shipments when they could maximize their profits. The wealth from this turned Venice into this incredible city of marble palaces and serious naval power. And here's the key insight. Venice got rich not by owning land or growing things, but by controlling logistics, by sitting at the right spot in the supply chain. Sound familiar? That's basically the playbook a lot of modern companies still use. But here's what happens with monopolies. The more Venice squeezed Europe, the more desperate everyone else got to find a way around them. And this is where the story gets really interesting. You know Christopher Columbus, right? The guy who discovered America? Here's the thing nobody tells you. He wasn't looking for a new continent. He was looking for a shortcut to the spice markets in Asia. He thought if he sailed west, he could get to India faster and cut out all the middlemen. He was completely wrong about the geography, obviously. But his mistake literally reshaped the entire world. Same deal with Vasco da Gama sailing around Africa, same with Magellan going around the whole planet. Every single one of these famous expeditions that we learn about in school as exploration and discovery, they were really just business moves, financial maneuvers to get cheaper spices. Empire followed profit, geography followed greed. And when Europeans finally reached the Americas, they stumbled onto something they weren't expecting. A whole new wave of valuable crops. Chili peppers, vanilla, cacao, allspice. None of this existed in Asia or Europe before 1492. And within just a few decades, these New World products completely transformed cuisines across the planet. Indian food, Sichuan cuisine, Korean dishes, all of that heat and spice we associate with those cultures, it came from the Americas. The New World went from being this weird curiosity to being a major economic engine, a second spice frontier. And this moment, this collision of Old World and New World goods, that's really the beginning of globalization as we know it. But the real game changer came when Europeans figured out how to industrialize all of this. In 1602, the Dutch created something the world had never seen, the VOC, the Dutch East India Company. This wasn't a government, wasn't a guild, it was a corporation, with shareholders and dividends and legal rights and, here's the wild part, the authority to wage actual war. This company could sign treaties, build forts, mint coins, execute prisoners, and govern entire territories. It was basically a multinational corporation with the power of a country. And their strategy was simple: monopolize everything. The VOC went after the Banda Islands, the only place on Earth where nutmeg grew naturally. And their methods were brutal. They massacred local populations, enslaved survivors, and enforced total control over every single nutmeg tree. This wasn't trade, it was extraction. And it made Amsterdam the financial center of the world. The VOC traded shares on the world's first stock exchange. Modern finance was basically born here, fueled by spices and enforced by violence. The English copied the model with their own East India Company. Eventually, that company didn't just serve the British Empire, it basically became the engine of the British Empire. Now, here's why any of this matters today. When you look at the modern economy, with its supply chain disruptions, its battles over rare minerals and semiconductors, its tech giants controlling data and cloud infrastructure, the patterns are almost identical. Medieval Venice controlled the sea route. Today's companies control data centers. The Dutch monopolized nutmeg. Today's giants monopolize software and logistics. The tools changed. The logic didn't. The world is still organized around choke points, semiconductor factories in Taiwan, shipping canals, cobalt mines in Congo, cloud servers, and just like the spice networks of the past, they're controlled by a small number of players who understand that access is power. Whether the commodity is pepper or data, the rule stays the same. Control the path, and you control the world. History doesn't repeat exactly. But man, it rhymes with alarming precision. Anyway, if this gave you a new way to think about things, consider subscribing. I've got more stories like this coming. History has a lot of answers if you know where to look.